Welcome to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore living the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, and Dr. Pat on transformationtalkradio.com. Are your thoughts keeping you small? Are you ready to get big? I will offer you ideas to transform what you are thinking into conscious action. Explore what is keeping you small and how to shift your behaviors in order to get big. Learn what is possible for you. Get ready to get big and live life out loud starting now.
Hey, everybody, welcome to a fabulous show we have for you. And, Kari is going to make the case for something today. But if you're me and you're like this quadruple Sagittarian, then the word travel makes you do yippee skippy in place. And she's going to make a case for travel. And I need to hear it because I haven't been traveling. No, that's not true. I traveled to the East Coast, but that's not the kind of travel. Today in this episode, we're going to take the case of travel for important things we learn in the process. And boy, do we learn it. Kari, this is exciting. The case for travel. Is that like a little play on words, like case, like, okay, case. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, did I take that too far right there?
Oh, I actually thought about why we travel, why we should travel. And then I thought the case for travel, because I did think of my suitcase and things like that. But
exactly.
Yeah, travel is today's show. We're going to make a case for why, like the not like physically and like why we travel, but like mentally why we travel, and the benefits of it and how it can help us. So yes, this show is all about the case for travel.
Well, and then you have some recent experience too.
Yes, and I was thinking about this because I just went on a trip to Guatemala, and it was one of my first trips out of the country in a long time.
Wow.
And it was kind of thrilling for me because it woke up so many things, and I was thinking about what I was learning as I was traveling. And then I thought, what does travel do, whether it's out of the country, out of the state, whether it's in our own town, but to a different part? It doesn't mean you have to necessarily use your passport or have some like exotic vacation planned. But I thought about the benefits of travel. And again, not just for like, oh, I'm traveling for work, like to go do something, but the idea of like, I'm traveling to experience something. I'm traveling to go to a new place or have an experience and what it can teach us. And because of my own experience recently in Guatemala, I just felt like it'd be a great topic to explore as something that helps us get outside of our regular routines.
Yeah.
Teaches us a lot too. So that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Well, I'm glad that we're talking about it because, and I want to make this point, whether you're going to Guatemala or you're going to another country, or how should I say it? You're traveling somewhere in the United States. Travel is travel. And what's so important about that for many people is that we learn what we learn. And even my trip from Chicago last year to go back to New Jersey, so much. But for you, how much out of your comfort zone did Kari Knutson have to get? The world-renowned speaker, right?
Yeah, well, that's why it's so great, because when you think about travel, one of the benefits I was saying is it makes you, and like nothing else, when we think about getting out of our comfort zones, when you think travel, I think it's one of the easiest ways to get out of your comfort zone, because almost from the minute you get to the airport, you have to finagle things and arrange things and be a problem solver and be patient and be thoughtful and manage things as they come up. And then in situations when we're traveling, our comfort zone is constantly pushed. And I was reflecting on my own likes and dislikes, what was pleasurable for me, what was not. And I noticed myself expanding because I was forced to get out of my comfort zone. And whether that be like, when you think typically, it could be like language is different, food is different. But I also think about your comfort zone of like, how you make a phone call, how you get from one place to another, how you should act in certain situations, like things you're going to take for granted, like of your comfort of even getting from place A to B in your home. It looks so different. So I was feeling about like emotionally, mentally, physically, a lot of physical things were out of my comfort zone. So I think it was an interesting way to think travel pushes you. And then the question then is, why is it important that we get out of our comfort zones? That's what leads to my next question. So what I was thinking was, how our brain loves our comfort zone. Our brain is like, oh, thank you so much for like, I know when I'm in my home environment, I know what to expect. I know the schedule. I know where everything is. And my brain's like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I feel like our brains are like, thank you. And they're happy. And what it does is that kind of complacency or knowing what to expect sometimes keeps us from experiencing things in a way that when you get out of your comfort zone, I feel like you wake up, you start to become hyper aware. Your brain has to engage, and that can be thrilling and fun. It can also be tiring. It can also be exhausting, but I feel like it's how we know we're alive. Like we're being stimulated in a way that's like, I know I'm living right now because I'm really fully engaged in the present moment. I'm out of my comfort zone, and out of your comfort zone is growth and opportunity. And that's can be from good or bad things. So I'm not saying it's all has to be positive, but I do think the end result in some way is growth.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm here back home in Seattle area, and Linda's here with me. But last year I was in New Jersey. And when we talk about travel, whether it's to another country or the United States, you're going to find differences and you're going to find similarities. And even the comfort zone, let's take one thing, because I want you to talk to this, because I know a little bit about South America, but I would love to hear your story on this. Traveling within the country and the state. So travel to the place, that's one thing. Now you're here. Simply put, when I go back to New Jersey, I am at my Seattle pace. I talk to people at the register and I'm holding up the line. Or when I'm driving, I'm like, OMG. And Linda's like, you better drive faster. You got to drive faster. And I'm like, I'm doing it. She said, you got to drive faster. You got, like, I mean, why are you staying in this lane? Get over in that lane, then move back in this lane. And then now Linda's here. And like, I got white knuckles. And then Linda drives a lot here, but I got white knuckles because this is a slower pace. It's really different. People let you in. They actually let you cut in. That's just one thing, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
for you, you had to travel within the travel. What was that like for you?
Well, I love that you bring up though this idea. Let's just talk about driving for like a norm, because I think the norms for driving are so interesting. You're just talking about in the United States, East Coast, West Coast driving, right?
Right.
Colorado. And it's funny because I had some friends visit from Boston, and I just said, hey, before we drive, just so you know, we don't normally honk here unless
Yes.
it's an emergency. So like, don't get all Boston-y and start just honking because someone cut you off. Like, we don't do, and we let people in. So it's funny because we had that conversation. And then I felt like when I was in Guatemala, so Central America, Guatemala is Guatemala City is the biggest city in Central America. And driving there was a full contact sport between all kinds of situations in the road. And I found myself, my expectations for highway driving, city driving, country driving, like it just shocks you because there's different ways of driving, of living, of expectations, of like you said in your like you have to code switch almost. You have to be like, in this environment, this is how I can act in this environment. And it's funny for me because I couldn't drive in Guatemala. It was too intense.
Oh,
I had a
wow.
friend who was driving us, then I hired a driver, then we were in buses and other things.
Oh,
And just observing it. And I thought that's so interesting because now when I'm back in Colorado, I'm like, oh, and it was funny for me to take driving for granted. Whereas it was a real, every time we dealt with traffic there, my brain was on high alert. And
exactly.
it was great though for me to experience like another way, and then to appreciate when I got back, what I have. I don't think I would have really thinking in my daily life how much I appreciate the ability, how I drive here versus like if I was in Guatemala City, I don't know if I'd be a driver there, if I have to like constantly get help or not have a panic attack. But people adjust to different things, and that makes you think this is the norm. And when you're living in different places, like especially big cities, driving's different. So I love that you brought that up because driving was a big part of that, and noticing my own comfort level, discomfort, my fear. At some point too, there was mudslide in the road, and then we were going up the side of a mountain, and the driver was so adapted, like, but then there's like tuk-tuks on the road and motorcycles and other cars and big buses and other things, and I was like, I just had to notice my own, and he was very confident. going around the mudslide, dealing with people. And it really gave me an opportunity to reflect. And that's what made me think about doing a podcast on this. What do we reflect on? How can we code switch in a way, or like our norms change? And then how can we either appreciate things more? What do we appreciate more? And also, what do we have insight to? So those things, I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought up topic, because that was a big thing for me.
Well, it's the one thing I wanted to start out with, because you're traveling within the travel, and we forget about that sometimes. Well, oh, going on a big trip. Okay, great. You go to London, right? Do you know how to actually drive that vehicle on that side of the road, people? But it teaches us something about itself. What did you learn? If you had to pick, let's talk about this, because our brains really like the challenge and like to go back to autopilot. It's a very interesting thing with our brains. It's like our mind is so hungry to try something new, and then it pushes us to the end of our patience, to the end of our norms, right? It forces us out of our comfort zone. Um, even if the pace is slow. I've been to Hawaii a gazillion times. I was in a relationship with someone that was born in Hawaii, and so I've been there like a lot. And the first time I was there, I was cautioned. And what was I cautioned about? Pat, you're no longer in Kansas. And what were they saying to me? You're on Hawaii time now. Stop looking at your watch. We're going to go to have lunch, but we're going to go like when we go. We're going to go boogie boarding first. And then we're going to, and boy, it took me all of a hot second to get used to that.
Sure. And it's funny because, like you're saying, getting used to things that are out of your comfort, out of your norm, depending on how people live, or their attitude towards time, towards driving, towards money, towards hospitality, towards whatever it is. Your norms are tested, and it's great, I feel, as a reflection tool. Like, I love how you said travel within the travel. Like, what am I exploring about me when I'm in new places? And that is the kind of the invitation of today's podcast, is to think about travel as a way for the inner exploration of what we learn about ourselves. Because I know I'm more heightened, like I'm like, in a way, I find it funny because I'm a little more like fast paced, talk fast, what's next, what's the schedule. And then when people are not, like you're saying, your friends in Hawaii, I feel like I notice in myself, like I get antsy. I'm like, well, like I like to know the schedule and I like to know the time. And then I had to laugh at myself and be like, why in this space, this isn't called for now, but you automatically do that. That's your autopilot response. It's great to reality test that. Do I need to do it right now? Why is that coming up for me? Is it around control? Is it around like how I like things to be? And can I give some of that up and have a new experience? So that's why I think the brain is kind of going between rigidity and flexibility, and you're finding a place in there through some analysis of like where you can grow.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's valuable to, like, you're picking some really great examples between travel and timeliness. Like driving is a great thing to know. So how people feel about time is another, and then how we respond to it. That's the goal. So I love that you brought those things
It
up.
is, but let's talk about it. Travel. I think what you talk about is travel equals a new stimulus, and it does. Let's talk about that, because it doesn't matter to me where I travel to. I gave New Jersey as an example, and by the way, for you all, I grew up there and I'm born in the Bronx, and so I do adapt quickly when I'm back there. I'm getting ready to go back there again. However, I don't adapt quickly to driving. Now, when I had to drive myself to table tennis coaching on Route 22 in Jersey, I'm like praying. I got like the prayer beads in the car. I got the whole thing in the car. And I don't understand why that was for me, Kari, because normally driving doesn't bother me. And so there's something that hit me as a new stimulus when I go back there. Now, traveling to other places, I'm getting ready to think about going to my roots in South America. I can't even imagine what that was like for you to go from Colorado. Guatemala is like highly spiritual too, right?
Yeah, well,
What did that feel like?
oh, it was amazing. And I honestly, I had not been out of the country in 15 years, and it was a long time coming. And I had my own, I had been to Guatemala before, like 20 some years ago. And this time I was traveling with my daughter, so that was another element to it. But what felt amazing about it was, first of all, feeling lucky to have the opportunity to have a passport and feel so
Yeah.
grateful that I could make the choice to go. And then knowing I was going to connect with some amazing people there and have these experiences, but also like to say, like, you know how I think travel gives you a lot, but it also asks a lot. So like getting ready, getting yourself there, feeling like mentally you're ready to manage all of the things that you take for granted, right? And then doing it with my daughter was so amazing, but then also having another person to make sure you're taken care of. And so I think like wherever you go, and that's what I want, if you're listening to this podcast thinking, well, I'm not going to Guatemala anytime soon. I'm like, it's not about going how far you go or where you go. I feel like whether it's another state, another part of your of town, even the idea of like, can I help my brain kind of go between that rigidity and flexibility and doing new things and having experiences in new places? Again, it wakes our brain up in a way that I think lets us, to me, the stimulus is so important because the comfort zone piece, there's no growth there. And when you really want to think about growth, and so for me, even planning this trip, how am I growing? Like, how am I growing in my own adaptability to prepare myself to go with another person and then to coordinate all the things that need to be coordinated? And then to be, I think the next phase is once you get there, being open to what you're going to experience.
Yeah.
And the idea of like not knowing things, like, I need your help to get here. I don't know the answer to this question. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. And like physically, mentally preparing yourself to be in that discomfort and the state of like not knowing, I think that's again very valuable for growth. And I like the idea, how do you prepare yourself? Sometimes when you think about prepping yourself, you pack your bag, but you don't pack your mental bag.
No, you don't.
And I feel like we spend a lot of time prepping and what outfits I'm gonna have and like getting our stuff already. But the mental piece of like, how am I going to go into this experience? What do I want to get out of it? What am I open to learning about other people and myself? I think that's the mental packing that can be helpful too before we have a new experience. Can I keep myself open?
Yeah. And let's talk about this because I want to talk about whether it's negative events or positive events. And of course, I'm going to two ends of a spectrum, but let's go there. There's everything in the middle. But something you said earlier that I want to jump back to, it's this idea that here we are and we're looking for this balance, but in the middle, we have this in our subconscious or unconscious part of us, we're always seeking safety for the unknown. And that's really a lot of times what triggers things, I think. But there are things to learn from this, both negative and positive. Now, the flip side of this, just a little sidebar. When I said to Linda, you're coming back here, and I just want to warn you about the traffic. Okay, y'all live here. Y'all know what I'm going to say right now about living here with the I-5 and the 405. Emily, you know what I'm talking about.
In case you don't know, right? It's Seattle.
Okay. We are surrounded by water everywhere. What does that mean? We have a couple of bridges, and then we got the ferry. And so even though I say this, right, you have to have the experience of leaving on a Friday afternoon to get down from Seattle to the Tacoma area. For Linda to say, I don't think we need to pay for the HOV lane. And I say, oh, Linda, we do. But we don't really need to pay. Do we need to pay that HOV $15 thing for the pass thing? I said, oh, yeah, we do. But it's kind of moving here. I said, trust me, we do. And then to watch the expression on her face when it stops moving, or we're coming back from Everett and she sees the traffic on I-5 bumper to bumper. And her answer is, how does such a little town have so many people?
Well, and unless she was there, she wouldn't know. I mean, imagine if she was still on the East Coast, you could be talking about how crazy the traffic in Seattle was. But that's another great point. Sometimes you don't believe it till you see it. Sometimes you don't know till you know. And that's another great part of like having empathy. Like imagine that conversation on a phone call. Man, traffic's been crazy in Seattle versus being there and be like, yeah,
Linda's like, get over it. But let's talk about some other things because traffic is one thing, but it's I want to point it out because it is the thing that we deal with, whether we're here and whether we're not. Travel within travel is what we deal with, whether we're here or not. And it plays a big part. For example, you have to be mindful of what do you like, what do you don't like, what's easy for you, what's not easy for you. And how do you assimilate into a culture for the time you're there? But there's so many things about self-awareness. Let's talk about self-awareness, but also let's talk about self-awareness and a respect and an empathy for the culture that you're now in. I mean, look, the day that I first trip to Hawaii, beautiful, go to the Big Island, and I'm picking up a piece of lava that I'm going to take home. And oh my gosh, you would thought somebody died because all of my friends, especially the people that are local, they're like, oh no, put that down. And I'm like, it's a piece of lava. Put that down. People that take things from the island, bad things happen. See, and for me, I'm a little superstitious. So I dropped that piece of lava that it was hot as the day it popped out of that volcano. But let's talk about these things. How will you be made aware of some of the self things? Did you find yourself saying, oh, I don't like this? Or how did you navigate those waters? Because they're deep waters.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk about travel, because I feel like self-awareness is one that I think the two things you get are self-awareness and empathy. So let's talk about self-awareness first, because when you travel, the self-awareness piece of sometimes, so like in new situations for me, I'm noticing more about what I like, what I don't, what frustrates me, what doesn't, when I have patience, when I run out. And I can, again, that rigidity, flexibility, I'm right in the middle of the self-awareness piece. And it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. I feel like you're getting information in ways you can't get in your normal environment. So like for me, I was noticing my comfort level shifting like at different parts of the trip, depending on like, I had a friend with me for one part of it, and then we had a guide for another part of it versus another part we were on our own. And I noticed my ability to relax or not, like when we're on my own scheduling things versus when someone's helping me. I also noticed I felt like some days I was real confident and I'm like, I'm going to ask for directions in Spanish. I'm going to try to do this. And other days I didn't have the energy or I got flustered on some of my words and then I wasn't making sense. And then I was trying to use Google Translate. And then I just felt like, but I noticed like some days I had so much confidence and other days I was like fumbling around, and it made me look at myself and the complexities, like what else is going on for you? Right. And some days our confidence, isn't that funny how sometimes we're like, you feel like I could take on the world and I'm so confident and it doesn't matter. And then some days you get really judgy about yourself and like, why aren't I better and whatever. And again, I use that as an opportunity just to observe myself and say, what's going on for me right now? And then noticing too, when I could give up, I think what I learned most about myself is my need for controlling things. Like when could I give up control and just let things happen? And then what was the outcome better? The answer is yes.
Oh gosh. Well, I want to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the self-awareness. You got a couple of stories to really share. And one of them I'm extremely familiar with. It is an understanding I got from my experience with my coach, who is from Ghana, Africa. And it has to do with things we take for granted here. But so much of this gives us a new sense of awareness, but it does more than that. And I want to hear this from you, is it changes us in some way. Somehow these experiences have an impact on us and change us in some way. But I want to talk about that when we come back. Before we go to break, Kari, how do people find out about you? Also coaching, speaking, you are a fabulous coach. You also help people in media and speak. And do you do any speaking in Guatemala? I don't know. But how do people find out about that?
Yeah, so you can go to knutsonspeaks.com. It's KNUTSON speaks.com. And I do presentations, trainings, coaching, and it's all around psychology and how we think, how we use our minds to make our lives better. So I call what I do taking psychology off the couch to make our lives better. And that's the website at knutsonspeaks.com is where you can find out all about me.
And when we come back, yes, there is a difference between living on the East Coast and living on the West Coast. And when we come back, we're going to talk story. What happens when you see a person shift and change? You observed it for yourself, probably observed it for your daughter. But what happens when we see that shift and change? And you watch your best friend now complaining about how fast people are going in the development and how they might kill the rabbits, which she hit the brakes for and not kill the little rabbit. All of a sudden, I got my New Jersey friend that's giving names to the rabbits in Bothell, New Jersey. Let's take a short break, everybody. We'll be right back. Oh, everybody, welcome back. This is Get Big Out Loud, Kari Knutson. You know, look, Kari, this is so interesting you're talking about this because you speak, you travel everywhere. You're a speaker. Like you're like a gazillion days a week and you're out speaking because you love to do it and you're so good at it. And by the way, for those of you that want to really learn from one of the best, Kari Knutson, you can hire Kari to help you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be talking to her to help me because although I think I speak pretty good, I need some improvement. Kari, look, I want to talk about how you shifted, how you changed, but you also got some deep insights of some of the pain that goes on in other countries.
Yes.
Now, you're a lot smarter than I am. I'm not kidding. Listen, I found out about my heritage. My grandfather was born in Brazil. That was the biggest secret in the whole, supposed to be all Italian. But none of my mom's people looked like the rest of the Italians. They didn't. A lot of them had dark hair and blue eyes. Looks crazy looking, right? I look more like my mom's side of the family than my dad's. But I found out, like, grandfather was born in Brazil. So what do? I started to freshen up on my Spanish. What's the news flash? They don't speak Spanish. They speak Portuguese. So each of us, I'm trying to learn it because I want to go back. I want to visit my relatives. I didn't understand our South American roots on about my mom's side and my dad's side. There are more Bacilis in South America than there are in Italy. I didn't know this. So there are ups, there are downs, there are adjustments, there are changes. But in the end, we
like you
learn
said, things
something.
you don't know until you be like, I'm going to brush up on my Spanish. Oh, what, they speak Portuguese? Like you wouldn't know that until you started thinking about that. And like, that's part of your growth though, right? So like, and also to be able to say like, when you travel, so there's some things I just don't know what I don't know. Or there's some things that are going to be hard for me that I don't even know time in them, how I'm going to deal with it. Or there's some things that are going to be amazing and beautiful. And I'm going to like love this experience so much and just hold on to it. Like, that's the beauty of travel. And like when you said I travel a lot for work, I do. But I think traveling for work to me is I'm not about necessarily having a new experience.
Yep.
And that's why I want to say travel, when you think of the case for travel, is I'm going to do something to have an experience, not just to go to work or whatever I normally do. And that's why I think traveling for me is whether it's down the street to some new part of town or to another state or to another country, I'm saying this as an opportunity, like to do something, have an experience that pushes you outside of your comfort zone a bit. And that's, again, the case for travel is no matter where you are, you can do this while staying in your own town. Because I guarantee you, there are parts of town that you never go to where you could have a new experience that would heighten your awareness. And another thing you're saying is when you're talking about your awareness of things that you take for granted, maybe too, like, so I want to tell the story about my daughter and how, so I was reflecting on what we learned from the trip, and she's 15 and it was her first time out of the country. And she said, Mom, I've never thought about water so much. I've never thought about water. Because we're like, can we drink it? Can we not? Is this safe? How are we going to get it? How do other people get it? What is the sanitation process for water? What is the bottled water industry like? All this, I mean, water was such a topic while we were there that we never talk about at home. Really, like we talk about, did you drink enough today? Are you hydrated? But we didn't talk about, like, is this water safe or not? Should we be getting ice cubes or not? Or things like that. And what was great to talk with, my daughter's name is Annie, to talk with Annie about it was that she's like, I really haven't valued water, right? I haven't seen the value. I just take it for granted. So the insight of that experience with like, with dealing with water was so good for her to say, like, I really was able to take this for granted. And now I'm thinking about it in a different way. And that's where I thought, okay, there's a little growth. I'm realizing not everyone has access to water the way I do. I'm realizing that I take water for granted and that other people can't. I'm realizing that some people have to do dealing with water is a huge part of things that take up their brain space, whereas
Yeah.
she just doesn't really think about it. And I love that compare, contrast, what's like me, what's different than me, how do I feel about it? And so when we were talking about that, I'm like, oh, there's the growth moment, right? There's the moment, the travel within the travel.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this. About 10 years ago, longer, I think now, Tom Angel and we formed a nonprofit, and I worked with Tom. He was the head of it, and he formed a nonprofit called Airqua. And back then, there were people that were talking about machines that can turn air to water. Now, we bought in lock, stock, and barrel. We had a plan to really help people because this was near and dear to both of our hearts, right? We had this plan only to find out that the machine manufacturers couldn't really deliver. It was one of the biggest heartbreaks. There are two heartbreaks in business I've had, in both with nonprofits. This was one of them. The other one was to build a new kind of campus addiction center. Now, the water one, we bought hook, line, and sinker. But why am I telling you that? I'm telling you because of what I learned. And we take water for granted. But in the end, that wasn't the only learning. There are other things we take for granted, right? It's how to get from here to there. Tell me about your experience about how do I get from here to there? Because obviously you didn't stay in one place there, did you?
No, we didn't. And the idea of what we learned from that, like I again, things we take for granted. I can get in my car and go drive where I want to go. And then being in a place where you need other people's help or you're having other experiences. So like our first experience landing at the airport, I have a friend that lives there named Mario who helps who picked us up, right? And then but driving with him on the streets and I'm being like, oh my God. And it's normal for him. And it's totally not for me. It's a different level like of driving, right? And then when we think about too, then arranging, we were going to Guatemala City and then a place called Lake Ataclan. And we hired with another friend of mine, hired a driver to drive like 3 hours to get there. And then from there, we're in tuk-tuks, like those little motorcycle things with things in the back, driving around these little village towns. And then we're in the back of a truck on one day because we're trying to go up the side of a mountain to visit another place, like a lot of different, and then we're walking a ton too. We're walking and walking and walking. And so that was, to me, so funny. And then one day what was great is we had to take a truck with, and we would never do this here, so it's the bed of a truck, an open bed with seats, and then there's some room inside. And so I was inside and my daughter Annie was outside, but this truck, you just stood up and we were going around the town, and it was a rainy season and in the afternoon it rains. And so I'm inside the truck and Annie is outside the truck. And I was thinking, in the United States, I don't know if you can legally be outside of a truck or not. I'm not sure. So she's outside, it starts to rain and I'm like panicking because I'm like, oh my God, she's in the pouring rain in the back of this truck. We're going up the side of this mountain. Oh my gosh, is she okay? So finally, when we get out, she has the biggest smile on from ear to ear. And she's like, that was amazing. And here I am on the inside of the truck being like, oh my gosh, is she okay? It's raining. And she's like, and this is what she said, when would I ever go up the mountain in the back of a truck in the pouring rain? And she was so excited. And her excitement was so funny in comparison to my worry and like what was normal and not normal. And she's like, when would I ever have the chance? And it made me think, sometimes when we travel, we do things we would really never have the chance to do. And that legitimately made her excited. Like she was full of excitement around it, and I was dreading it. And then she was like, whee! And so it made me think about when we have experiences that travel, sometimes we just can't get that in our spaces, in our regular spaces, in our comfort zones. We just can't have these experiences. And for me, I felt like her having that and seeing the pure joy and the thrill of an adventure like that was something I couldn't have given her here. And so that was a fun like moment to realize. And then another part of the case for travel was doing things when you're not in control of things sometimes, and having those experiences can be to your benefit. They can, there's things that you'd be like, I can only do this in this space. And even when we're talking about little things like driving, the idea of like being in a physical space when you can observe that for yourself versus hearing about it is so different, because I think then you can internalize it. And that's another case for travel, getting out there and experiencing it, not just hearing about it.
Yeah. Susan Dene, one of our other hosts, also a friend of mine, and and Joe, they're like me, motorcycle, what do you call it? Enthusiasts, but even more than that, Joe is amazing. They took a trip with Brent to Eastern Washington. So you have to understand Washington. It's like Colorado, I think. You have to understand that once you go across a mountain, the whole thing changes from like here to a desert, right? But
Right.
the most beauty. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go with them. I could rent a Harley. It's so easy to do. And Linda's like, why do you want to do that? You're just going to get killed. Like the guy got killed down the road from you, and you're just going to get on that and get killed because people here don't know, right? They don't know how to drive and da 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 da. And it's going to be raining. I'm saying, Linda, it's 87 degrees out. We're in our summer. But we have different views of it. And then I said to her, you're right. I wouldn't do it alone. I wouldn't go buy a Harley these days because you're right. She says, it's not about how good you drive, Patty. It's about how bad these people here drive, right? And she's right. But I would go with Susan and Brent because you're in a group, you're not singular, right? But I had that moment, that itch, that
Mm-hmm.
itch. I also understand that you have to be prepared. You don't know how you're going to feel. I don't know if the vibration would help me. So you have another story to share, and I want you to
Well,
share
and
it.
it, yeah, because you don't know how you're going to feel. I
You
agree. And
don't
so
know.
sometimes when things don't go well, we have to be prepared because like sometimes things don't go well when we travel. Sometimes things get in bad situations. And sometimes we also don't feel compelled to travel by ourselves, but we may be with other people. Or sometimes we want to have experiences by ourselves. So the whole that whole is a whole another elephant, I guess, that you'd have to like take
Yeah.
apart. But for the idea when things don't go well, I think you can still learn from them. And that's another thing I want to talk about is sometimes travel gives you an opportunity to see what happens when things don't go well. And you can still reflect and be like, how did I show up? And like, so for me in this situation, I got sick on my last day there.
Wow.
And it was like Montezuma's revenge kind of situation. And I couldn't get out of bed. And the amazing thing is that my daughter, here's my 15-year-old daughter, now we're in Antigua. We end up in Antigua. And she I needed some medicine, I needed something to drink, I needed a lot of things. So she had to go to the pharmacy and also to the store. And she is not fluent in Spanish. And she had to like figure it out because I couldn't do it. And the most amazing thing was my sickness actually gave her an opportunity to step up. And she
Wow.
was uncomfortable. She didn't want to go to the pharmacy. She didn't know how to ask for things. But she did it, right? She figured it out. And the most amazing thing is, in the moment, she wasn't psyched about it. And it caused a lot of anxiety. And then once we got everything settled, and also I had to change the flight and do all this other stuff, I felt proud that like, okay, we can make new plans. And then what I saw in her, which was so interesting, was it went from anxiety, fear, overwhelm, I don't want to, this is scary. I don't know if I can do it, to I did it. And then I saw like confidence grow. And so much so that on the way back in the airport, she's like, Mom, we're gonna go this way. Okay, this is our gate over here. Like I just saw her like stepping up in a
Wow.
way that I felt like it gave her permission to show that confidence. And then she truly felt it. And that experience again was not good going into it. She did not want to leave the place we were staying to go find a pharmacy, to go ask in Spanish, to try to help, and then to go to a store and like be using Google Maps, try to figure out where she can go. And the also thing is there was someone staying with us who only spoke Spanish who agreed to help, but she had to like finagle talking to them to get where they needed to go. So it was all of this out of comfort zone moments that she wasn't psyched about that she did, and then the outcome
Yeah.
was so positive. And I loved seeing that confidence boost. And that's another thing with the case for travel. Sometimes it's when things don't go well and you figure out your resilience that makes you proud after the fact,
Yeah.
right? That makes you happy after the fact.
Susan would call it a growth spurt. She had
Mhm.
a growth spurt and she wouldn't have had it otherwise.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
there's no way. And
no
that's
way.
why again, you can't have these moments in the same space because those experiences don't exist. So that's what I'm saying. The case for travel and getting outside those is those experiences only happen when you travel.
Yeah.
And it would never have had the experience with the water, with the truck, with going out on our own in the middle of Antigua, with like limited Spanish, a Google map, and a sick mom back at the hotel. You know what I mean? Like
I do.
step
But how
up.
did you feel? I mean, you know what these are? These are ginormous, get big out loud moments we were talking about. Out of all the shows we've ever done, these are the most get big out loud moments that we've shared because one, they're personal, and one, and two, they're transformative in
Yes.
ways that they wouldn't have been otherwise. But how did you feel sick in the room and your daughter's like wandering around and you're like, did you text her every 2 seconds or
No,
what?
this is the crazy thing because we just had my phone. She didn't have, so she took my phone.
Oh,
And then I just thought sometimes you just have to trust like this is all gonna work out. She's 15, she's gonna figure it out. And I couldn't physically actually engage with being on the phone or anything. I was just really
yeah,
sick.
you're sick.
And
Yeah.
and so the great thing though was because essentially my power was taken away. Also, my ability to do anything was taken away. So she had to step up. And in that occasion, she did. And again, we were both nervous about it. It wasn't like, oh, this is going to be great and easy. It was a challenge
Yeah.
that she could meet. And also the fact that it forced her to engage the person who was willing to go with her, like to the store, but they don't speak the same language and they don't know the area. It's like, and it's a travel within the travel.
Yeah.
Right? And so that part to me, sometimes you have to give up. Like I'm this is out of my control right now, and she's got to step up. And the fact that she could step up, I
Mm.
just see the ripple effects of that confidence, like even now. And so that's why I think the idea of travel is so valuable because
It is.
and not have those experiences in the place that you are. And
Yeah.
so leaving the places where we feel most comfortable does help us in all sorts of ways, even when it's not positive. And that's what I want to make sure it's not, because I love to think about travel, so glamorous, whatever. There's parts of travel that are horrible and
Oh,
boring and painful, you know, and the question then, if the reason we're doing the show about it is then what did I learn
yeah.
about myself, about other people, about my experiences? And so that self-awareness piece is so great because when you come back home and you're in your back in your comfort zone, it's so great to see what you learned if you can be processing that. What did I learn about me or about other people?
Well, look, you are an emotional intelligence expert. So I want to talk about feelings. I want to talk about new feelings. And you have so many stories. You have another story about a friend who ended up staying home over the weekend when her family went camping. Now, I want to talk about that story because sometimes that does happen. Sometimes you're not able to participate, but you get new experiences and new feelings. And you must have mentioned about 20 of them today, just in this one trip. But it doesn't have to be a flight to Guatemala
Mhm.
for us to understand it. Talk about this new experience, new feelings with your friend.
So
Now,
I
I
was
got to tell you, if I had to stay at home because of a camping trip, I'd be jumping up and down with joy. But
see, that's everyone's taste, right? So I was talking to a good friend of mine about the case for travel because I said I really want to talk about travel in my next podcast and this experience I had in Guatemala. And what she told me this amazing story, she was like, oh, I had a travel situation in my own town. And I thought what was the best thing about it is it brought up all the points I wanted to make about going to another country and showed how you can do it in your own town. So basically what happened is my friend Elaine got sick right before a camping trip with her family and just didn't think she could go. And so her family ended up going and she stayed home and she felt better after about a day. And then she's like, well, what am I going to do now? Like with me. And so it kind of unfolded naturally, which is part of a great adventure, but it's like, oh, I'm going to take my dog on a long walk because I have time. I'm going to go explore a new trail in my town because I haven't been there before. And now I'm going to go see what this trail is like. And so like walking on the new trail was like exciting and spending time, and which is what we do when we travel. Sometimes we just spend more time doing things. So that was great. And then she's like, I'm going to take myself out to dinner. When have I last gone out to dinner? I'm going to try a new place for dinner. And there's like, oh, I'm going to see if I can get a single ticket to a show that's playing tonight in my town because I love theater, but when do I go? And I've not gone to my town's theater. And then she was having this great experience at her town's theater, meeting all these people, feeling so like interested. And she said the point was later, I felt like I was so engaged with the day because I'm on this trail now. And then I'm at dinner by myself and I'm meeting other people at the show. And I'm open to it because I'm not in my same space. I'm not doing the normal things I do with normal people. I'm in a different space. And she said the feeling of like the confidence that she had after the date, and the felt like she's like, I can do things by myself. I don't have to wait for someone to be like, do you want to go see a show? I can go get a ticket to a show. I can take myself to dinner. And the feeling of her town, like, how cool is my town that I have all these walking trails? How cool is the place that I live? Like, she's like, I have a sense of pride. I had this confidence. And I loved hearing her story because it was in her own town that she was traveling.
Oh my
And she
God.
was, again, engaging, waking up to new experiences. And then I feel like her self-awareness around, like, she got the travel within the travel is confidence to do things by herself. Confidence even to know what she wanted to do. What do I feel like? I want to go on a long walk. I want to go see a show. I want to take myself out to dinner. And again, if her family had been there, she'd been in her normal routines, she would have not have had those experiences. So it was like the travel was the opportunity she took.
There's so many other things I want to touch upon before we, have you talked about your closing message. We're just talking about a couple of things. We can do a whole show on the case for travel around new food. We can do an entire show because it isn't just going to a new place, but you have a new culture. You have new food experiences.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, A, B, C, D. It's not like you can call and have your pizza delivered, right? These are things also that help create a more robust resilience for each of us, isn't it? Right?
Oh, yeah. And I think the idea of, like, when do we have opportunities to do that? Like, most of us we set up our lives for comfort.
Yeah.
And we think that fear, to me, this is an interesting thing, like, we get the biggest thing that stops us from changing is fear. But sometimes I feel the biggest thing that stops us from changing is comfort. And
that's it. I agree with you on that. I didn't think about it like that. Say more about that. It's not just a comfort zone. It's different, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's our own. We set up our lives. We want that. The brain seeks that. We want normality, whatever's normal for us. We want our systems. We want our patterns because we just like that. But yet sometimes say, oh, I wish I could change, or I want to change. But I'm too scared. I'm too scared to do this or I can't because of this. And we say all these things. But the part of, like, our fears, I think, those are things that are tangible. Like, I can say, I'm scared to do that. I'm scared to drive in Guatemala for sure. Right. But, like, my comfort of staying here, if I never would have gone there and experienced, like, staying in my comfort zone or being comfort, it's actually staying in your comfort, like, comfort more than fear, I think, keeps us from doing that. And so I just thought that idea around travel, getting out of your comfort zone, but also, like, deciding, like, it's not, is it really fear that I'm dealing with, or is it, like, my comfort that I don't want to challenge? And I think travel forces you to face your fears, and it challenges what comfort means to you. And when you can do those things together, that equals change. I feel like whether the situation was good or bad, you come back from travel changed somehow.
Yeah,
and
you do.
I think that part of us that seeks change and wants change, or for me, I know this is my personal thing, but I'm really into, like, what makes me tick or what makes other people tick. And so I think that insight, it's hard to get that insight from being in the same place doing the same thing the way we do it all the time.
Yeah, because we don't even take the opportunity to even, people talk about thinking outside the box. Let's not even talk about that. We have our own box that we can change and manipulate in. But you have some questions for us to ponder on this. And the other thing also that I know that we didn't touch upon, it had to strengthen your relationship with your daughter.
Oh, definitely. I think it strengthened two relationships. One with my daughter for sure, because we were out of our normal routines. We talked about different things. We negotiated different things together. We ate different things, and we laughed about different things. We had totally different experiences than we would have had. And I didn't even think about the byproduct of that when I was planning the trip. I felt it as the trip was happening. And then surely after the return, because we're closer in different ways. And I think the relationship with my daughter, it was really valuable to do that. And then my relationship with myself, like, really, really, the excitement and all that, and then all of the highs and the lows, and thinking about, like, how I came back changed. It gave me a lot of energy for this next, part of my journey. And I think, like, my build up to the end of the year was doing a lot of speaking, a lot of travel, a lot of stuff, being kind of tired and like being excited, but at the same time, just doing go. And the chance to just stop and be somewhere so different where I didn't have the same access to technology. I didn't have access to do the things I normally do. And I'm with my daughter and we're having this experience. It was like a refresh almost on my brain, got to like be stimulated in so many different ways that my self-awareness for me grew. And that gives me some energy for the next part of the journey.
I love it. I love that you said that because, the takeaways from today are enormous. And I want to get back to something you said as we wrap this up. You don't have to go to Guatemala. You don't have to go there. You don't have to go to, another country for 13 hours. Because as I'm thinking about my return back to the East Coast when Linda goes back to help her with a few things, I'm looking forward to it for a lot of different reasons, right? Because it is a different place. I will learn to grow. I will learn how to be in a different environment, clearly air conditioning 24/7. But more importantly, I think we become different in those places, don't you?
Yes. Oh my God. I love that. We become different in those places. And that's a chance for us to see who we are outside of our normal spaces. That we become different in those spaces is so beautiful because that part is with us, but it's not always there when we're in our comfort zone spaces. So that opportunity happens when you are physically in another place. And I think that knowing yourself better, seeing those different sides of yourself, for better and for worse, like just helps with the whole human experience thing. And I love that you said that, because that's part of the case for travel is like you can talk about it or you can experiencing it. And when you go to some place for travel, the experience to me has a lot more weight than just talking about it.
I love it. Kari, thank you so much for today. Tell people again how they can work with you, find out more about you, all of the above. And if they have questions about the show, they can also talk to you about that.
Yes, definitely. I love to connect with people. That's like, one of my friends calls me a chronic extrovert. But you can find me at KnutsonSpeaks.com and you can email me at KnutsonSpeaks@gmail.com. And I love to work with organizations and individuals around presentations, coaching, around emotional intelligence, and any kind of collaboration that is meaningful. And I also help people who want to be better, like you said, public speakers, because I speak all the time and I'm constantly working on my craft. And I know after this experience, to me, like what I learned, this will show up now in my presentations. It will show up in the next version of who I'm going to be. So it's incredibly valuable.
Kari, thank you so much for today. Emily, thank you. And to all of you out there, this is one of the most profound cases for travel. Think about it for yourself. You don't have to go across the world, but take a trip. We'll see you next time.
You have been listening to Get Big Out Loud Radio, where we explore the complex, funny, and beautiful ride of life with me, Kari Knutson, joining Dr. Pat live every second Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com. I will help you to know which thoughts are keeping you small in order for you to get big. Get big and live your life out loud. For more information, visit KnutsonSpeaks.com.